that grid that's over the top of the world. It's very significant. This very aggressive looking symbol underneath it. Anybody recognize that symbol? The World Bank. The World Bank. And a book that I would highly recommend to you. By the way, I don't usually bring so much of my research material, but with this particular subject, so many people think that this is just fantasy. I thought I have to bring some material so that if you want, later on, you can come and have a look for yourselves. But this is a book called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman by a guy called John Perkins, who spent many years working for the World Bank or for subsidiaries of the World Bank. And his job was to go into developing nations and persuade the governments to buy into massive credit plans, basically to bring that developing nation government into hock. Because just like on the microcosm, once you've got an individual in serious debt, basically you've got them under control. If you can get a nation into serious debt, then you basically have them where you want them. And it shouldn't come as any great surprise to you that there's a very common denominator between all the countries that are classified as the axis of evil. This Bush term. And it's the countries like Cuba, North Korea, Iran, recently Russia. Anybody wondered why Russia has been demonized in the media, basically, for the last 6 months? Well, all of these countries, and Venezuela, of course, and an increasing number of Latin American countries, as Venezuela and Chavez starts to find ways to help these guys out of their debt to the World Bank, all of these countries that are part of the axis of evil are free of debt. And Russia paid off its last installment for all the billions that it borrowed after the collapse of the Soviet bloc back in 1990. So Putin had actually done an amazing job by appointing the 7 ugly sisters, the 7 oligarchs, to manage the industrial recovery. Of course, some of those oligarchs got a little bit too carried away and just wanted a bit too much power, and that's why, Putin has a bit of a problem with 1 or 2 of them. But his strategy was absolutely sound, because what he did was he identified the best guys in the country to take their particular industries and bring them, back up to full speed, and obviously enable Russia to become self-sufficient. And Russia's in exactly that position right now. The World Bank has a couple of henchmen to carry out its will, and that is the World Trade Organization, which has been around since 1995, and the World Health Organization. 2 organizations are complete misnomers, because let me assure you that the World Trade Organization has nothing really to do with world trade, and the World Health Organization definitely has nothing to do with health. But basically, any country that is signed up to membership of the World Trade Organization is effectively under the auspices of the UN. The World Trade Organization have deemed it quite legitimate for the US to export its hormone-impregnated beef. And it sees no reason why any nation, certainly any member nation, should reject the importation of contaminated beef, i.e. contaminated with the growth hormone. The EU at the moment refuses to import the American beef, so the EU has to pay a fine to the World Trade Organization of 150 million euros a year, because we don't want their contaminated beef. And that fine will increase as the EU continues to reject it. Then the fine increases until they can, make the pip squeak, and in the end, what they expect you to do is go, okay, we take it. Now, who's going to eat it? Well, but you won't know, because a big part of Codex is to remove the labelling on foods, as we shall see. Now, the EU, a lot of people are under the misapprehension or misimpression that the EU is a democratic organisation. Let me categorically assure you it's not.